Do you think The Conjuring is an accurate retelling of a real story? Because the truth behind it contains a shocking twist that almost nobody talks about. The movie tells the terrifying story of the Perron family and the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. But decades later, new historical evidence, and even testimony from the Perron's own daughter, would challenge one of the biggest claims in the entire case. So, what really happened inside the house that inspired The Conjuring? Let's find out. Let me introduce you to the Perron family. Roger Perron, 36, worked as a traveling jewelry craftsman, while his wife, Carolyn, 32, was a stay-at-home mother. Together, they had 5 daughters: Andrea, 12, Nancy, 11, Christine, 10, Cindy, 8, and little April, who was just 5 years old. In January 1971, the family moved into an old farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, known as the Arnold Estate. The house was enormous, about 288 square meters, with 14 rooms, most of them built entirely from wood. It had stood for more than 200 years, and many locals believed it had a disturbing reputation. According to local legends, the property was once associated with a woman named Bathsheba Sherman, who was rumored to have practiced witchcraft during the 19th century. However, when the Perrons purchased the house, they were never told about those stories. The only unusual thing the seller said was, if possible, keep the lights on at night. Roger and Carolyn assumed it was simply practical advice for an old rural home, so they thought nothing of it. Not long after moving in, strange events began to happen. Bedroom doors would open on their own. The children heard knocking inside the walls, but every time they checked, nothing was there. At times, a foul odor resembling spoiled meat would suddenly fill the house for no apparent reason. Carolyn, who spent most of her time at home, experienced the most unsettling incidents. While sweeping, her broom would mysteriously disappear, only to turn up in another room. While cooking alone, she often heard footsteps or the sound of someone brushing past her. One day, while peeling an orange, she claimed that red liquid with a metallic smell unexpectedly seeped from the fruit. Roger also noticed unusual occurrences, including rooms that became freezing cold without explanation and unpleasant odors coming from the basement. Still, he kept most of it to himself because he didn't want to frighten his wife or daughters. Each of the Perron children had their own unusual experiences. Andrea, the oldest, often sensed the presence of a quiet figure she called Manny. According to her, Manny simply watched the family with curiosity and never seemed threatening. She believed he might have been connected to a young man named Johnny Arnold, who reportedly lost his life at the property during the 1800s. The family also frequently heard the sound of someone sweeping the upstairs floor. Whenever they investigated, nobody was there. Yet somehow they would find a neat pile of dirt gathered in the middle of the room, as if someone had just finished cleaning. They nicknamed this mysterious presence the sweeping ghost. Another presence seemed almost motherly. The children said their blankets sometimes appeared to be tucked in by invisible hands, and they occasionally felt someone gently stroking or brushing their hair while they were trying to sleep. Over time, the activity became much more disturbing. One morning, Carolyn woke up covered in unexplained bruises and described feeling sharp pains throughout her body. She also began hearing whispers that repeatedly urged her to leave the house. Andrea also began seeing the frightening figure of a woman whose neck appeared severely injured. Unable to ignore everything any longer, Carolyn started asking neighbors about the property's past. That's when she learned that Arnold Estate had a long history of tragedy. Across 8 generations, numerous residents were said to have died under tragic or mysterious circumstances, including reported suicides, poisonings, drownings, and violent incidents. After enduring nearly 2 years of these experiences, the Perrons sought outside help. They contacted paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. On October 30th, 1973, the Warrens arrived at the house. As soon as Carolyn opened the front door, Lorraine walked directly toward the kitchen as though she already knew the layout. She placed her hand on the old stove, closed her eyes briefly, and then said, "I can sense a very dark presence here. A woman named Bathsheba." The Perrons were confused because they had never heard that name before. Lorraine encouraged Carolyn to research Bathsheba's history. During a later visit, Carolyn described another frightening experience. While resting on the couch, she suddenly felt intense pain in her calf. When she looked down, she found what appeared to be a deep puncture wound that was bleeding. Lorraine interpreted the incident as being connected to local stories, claiming that Bathsheba had once been involved in dark rituals involving knitting needles and an infant. It's important to note that these claims come from local folklore and have never been historically verified. As the activity reportedly intensified, Ed and Lorraine suggested conducting a séance, a ritual intended to communicate with spiritual entities rather than remove them. Andrea later recalled the event in interviews. According to her account, shortly after the séance began, Carolyn appeared to enter an altered state. She reportedly began speaking in unfamiliar sounds, and her voice changed dramatically. Family members also claimed that the chair she was sitting in suddenly lifted and was thrown across the room. Throughout the event, Lorraine repeatedly insisted she sensed overwhelming anger from a presence she believed to be Bathsheba Sherman. But who was Bathsheba Sherman, according to local legend? She was born in 1812 and married a wealthy farmer named Judson Sherman in 1844. Folklore describes her as becoming increasingly cruel over time. One widely repeated story claims that a neighbor's infant died while under her care. Another legend alleges that her own husband witnessed her attempting to harm their week-old baby as part of an occult ritual, after which she supposedly ended her own life by hanging from a tree in 1849. However, historical records tell a very different story. According to census documents and public records, Bathsheba Sherman did not die in 1849. She was still alive in 1881 and even attended one of her children's weddings. She eventually passed away in 1885 from natural causes related to old age and paralysis, and was buried beside her husband. Because of this, many historians believe the darker stories surrounding her were likely local folklore rather than an established historical fact. So what happened to the Perron family? After the séance, Carolyn's emotional condition reportedly became even worse. Roger blamed Ed and Lorraine Warren, believing their investigation had only added more stress to his wife. He asked them to leave and never invited them back. Even so, financial difficulties prevented the Perrons from moving. They remained in the house for a total of 9 years because they couldn't afford to relocate, and few people wanted to buy a home with such a reputation. Finally, in June 1980, the family left the property and moved to Georgia. In the years that followed, the house changed owners several times. Owners such as Norma Sutcliffe in 1987 and later Jen and Corey Heinzen in 2019 publicly shared stories of unexplained experiences, including doors slamming and unusual sounds inside the home. In 2022, the property was reportedly sold again to Jacqueline Nunez. Today, it operates as a destination for paranormal tourism and overnight stays. But here's the biggest twist. In a 2021 documentary, Andrea Perron made a surprising statement. She said that the woman with the injured neck, the figure she believed had haunted her family for years, was not Bathsheba Sherman. After conducting years of historical research, Andrea discovered that Bathsheba had never actually lived at the Arnold estate. Instead, she had lived on a different farm about 1 mile, or 1.6 kilometers away. Andrea now believes the mysterious figure may have been Susan Arnold, the wife of John Arnold, one of the property's earliest owners. Historical records indicate that Susan Arnold died at around age 50 after isolating herself in an attic storage room where she was later found after taking her own life by hanging. Andrea believes this tragic detail could explain the severe neck injury she repeatedly witnessed. She also believes the spirit may have deliberately presented itself as Bathsheba when Lorraine Warren visited, masking its true identity. Whether these events were paranormal experiences, misunderstandings, or stories shaped over time remains a subject of debate. But one thing is certain, the Perron family's story continues to fascinate people more than 5 decades later.